There's a real sense around the league that Cody Bellinger's future is reaching a defining moment, and the latest movement has only added more layers to the conversation. A 5-year proposal worth $160 million, complete with opt-out clauses, is now firmly on the table, and the message behind it is clear. The Yankees believe they have presented a fair offer, one that reflects both recent production and the risks that come with a long-term commitment. From their point of view, the ball is no longer in their court, and they appear comfortable with the idea of letting Bellinger walk if he decides the deal does not meet his expectations. When you break the numbers down, an annual value in the low 30s is not insignificant, especially for a player approaching 30 years old with a career that has included extreme highs and very real lows. There are people around baseball who would argue that this is already pushing the upper limit of what makes sense, given the volatility that has followed Bellinger since his peak seasons earlier in his career. That is why this decision feels so personal and so pivotal for him. It is not simply about choosing a team, but about deciding how much security he wants versus how much risk he is willing to take in pursuit of a larger payday. The situation becomes even more interesting when the Toronto Blue Jays enter the discussion. This is not just about adding a talented outfielder to their roster. In a division where margins are thin and rivalries are intense, signing Bellinger would also mean removing a key piece from a direct competitor. That dual impact changes the calculation entirely. For Toronto, it would not be a neutral move. It would actively weaken the Yankees while strengthening their own lineup, at least on paper. Looking at what Bellinger brought to New York last season, it is easy to understand why his absence would be felt. He delivered close to 30 home runs and nearly 100 runs batted in, providing protection and balance in a lineup anchored by Aaron Judge. Pitchers could not simply work around the star in the middle of the order because Bellinger made them pay. His presence created stability, and that stability is not easily replaced. Taking him out of that equation forces the Yankees to reshuffle their approach at the plate and potentially exposes them to stretches where opposing teams can be far more selective. From Toronto's perspective, the question is not whether Bellinger is a good player, because that much is clear. The real issue is fit, timing, and philosophy. The Blue Jays have spent recent seasons carefully weighing how new additions affect playing time for younger players they believe in. Committing 5 years and a massive sum of money to Bellinger would inevitably push someone else to the margins, and the organization has been vocal about valuing internal options and maintaining flexibility. There is also the comparison that keeps resurfacing between Bellinger and other elite outfielders who have been discussed in similar contexts. On the surface, recent stat lines can make players look comparable, but teams dig much deeper than that. Advanced metrics, underlying contact quality, and long-term projections all come into play. In those deeper evaluations, Bellinger still carries more question marks than some of his peers. His recent success has been strong, but it follows seasons where his production dipped dramatically, and that inconsistency weighs heavily when front offices consider deals that stretch well into a player's 30s. Age is another unavoidable factor. At 30, Bellinger is not old by any means, but the back end of a 5 or 6 year deal often tells a very different story than the front end. Toronto has to ask whether they are comfortable paying premium money not just for what he is now, but for what he might be several seasons down the line. That concern does not disappear simply because the short-term upside is appealing. At the same time, there is no denying how well his skill set aligns with what the Blue Jays often look for. He brings defensive versatility, capable of handling center field, corner outfield spots, and even first base when needed. He runs the bases well, controls the strike zone better than many power hitters, and adds a left-handed presence that can change the dynamic of an order. Those traits matter, especially for a team that has at times struggled to balance its lineup against right-handed pitching. The long-term roster picture also complicates things. Several current contributors are approaching free agency, and roles that look crowded now may open up sooner than expected. In that sense, adding a player like Bellinger could be seen not only as a move for the present, but as an investment in stability for future seasons. Still, That argument only holds if the organization believes he will maintain a high level of performance throughout most of the contract. Ultimately, this feels less like a traditional pursuit and more like a strategic crossroads. Toronto does not appear to be operating from a place of desperation, and that matters. Teams that panic tend to overextend themselves, while teams that stay disciplined are often willing to walk away, even from attractive options. The Yankees, meanwhile, seem content with their stance, having drawn a clear line and waiting to see whether Bellinger is willing to cross it. As the offseason continues to unfold, this situation remains a fascinating example of how value, risk, rivalry, and timing intersect. Bellinger has the leverage of being one of the most impactful remaining options on the market, but teams have learned hard lessons about chasing names without fully embracing the consequences. Wherever he ends up, the decision will ripple through the American League, shaping not just one roster, but the balance of power within an entire division. As the debate continues, what really stands out is how differently this situation can be interpreted depending on which lens you use. From a purely talent-based angle, Cody Bellinger makes almost every roster better the moment he walks into the clubhouse. There are very few players available who combine power, defensive value, positional flexibility, and postseason experience in the way he does. That alone keeps his market alive and ensures that conversations around him refuse to slow down, even as teams publicly signal restraint. For Toronto, the hesitation is less about doubt in the player and more about how that player fits into a carefully managed ecosystem. The organization has spent years emphasizing internal development, and that philosophy does not disappear simply because a big name becomes available. When you start mapping out everyday lineups, platoon advantages, and long-term roles, adding a high-profile veteran inevitably creates pressure points. Somebody loses at-bats. Somebody shifts positions. Somebody's development timeline gets altered. Those are not abstract concerns, especially for a front office that has repeatedly stressed patience and trust in its core. There is also the reality that Bellinger's recent resurgence has come in an environment that worked in his favor. Batting behind elite protection changes how pitchers attack you, and the margin for error becomes thinner for opposing staffs. That does not diminish his accomplishments, but it does require context. Toronto has talent throughout its lineup, yet the structure and flow are different. Translating production from one situation to another is never guaranteed, and teams have been burned before by assuming that recent numbers will automatically carry over. Another layer to this conversation is the competitive window. The Blue Jays are not rebuilding, but they are also not operating with unlimited financial freedom. Every major contract has ripple effects, especially when it stretches across half a decade or more. Committing that level of money to Bellinger could limit flexibility in future off-seasons, particularly if younger players reach arbitration or extension talks sooner than expected. The front office has to weigh whether this is the right moment to push aggressively or whether restraint preserves a more sustainable path forward. At the same time, it is impossible to ignore how much damage Bellinger can do against division rivals. Facing him repeatedly, especially in meaningful late-season games, is not a comfortable proposition for any pitching staff. Removing the threat from a Yankees lineup would change the dynamic of those matchups immediately. It is one thing to prepare for a single superstar in the middle of the order. It is another when that star no longer has the same level of support around him. That is why some view this potential move less as a traditional free agent signing and more as a chess move within the division. Even if Bellinger does not replicate his exact numbers, his presence alone forces adjustments. Defensive alignments change. Bullpen usage changes. Game planning changes. Those subtle edges matter over the course of a long season, especially in a division where head-to-head games often decide playoff positioning. Still, the risks cannot be brushed aside. Bellinger's career arc has shown how quickly performance can swing. There were stretches where his timing disappeared, his contact quality dropped, and confidence became a talking point. While he has worked his way back, front offices are paid to assume that past volatility could resurface. Betting on sustained consistency into a player's mid-30s is always uncomfortable, no matter how appealing the upside looks in the present. There is also the human element of the decision. Players talk. Clubhouses have identities. Comfort, familiarity, and trust in an organization all play roles that never show up on a spreadsheet. If Bellinger feels that his best chance to maximize both performance and legacy lies with continuity, that could outweigh a marginal increase in dollars elsewhere. On the other hand, if he believes the market still has room to move and that patience will unlock a significantly larger commitment, walking away from the current offer becomes easier to justify. For Toronto, this moment feels like a test of discipline. The temptation to strike, to make a bold move that sends a message to the division, is real. But so is the understanding that not every opportunity must be seized. The organization has shown before that it is willing to accept short-term criticism in favor of long-term belief. Whether that philosophy holds here will say a lot about how they view their current roster and their confidence in what they already have. As this standoff continues, the silence from certain corners may be just as telling as the rumors. Teams that truly believe they are done adding often let situations like this resolve themselves rather than forcing an outcome. Meanwhile, rivals watch closely, knowing that one signature could shift expectations overnight. Bellinger remains at the center of it all, holding a decision that could redefine not only his own future, but the balance of power across the American League East. What makes this even more intriguing is how patience itself becomes a strategy on both sides. Toronto can afford to wait because they are not scrambling to fill an obvious hole that threatens to derail the season before it starts. They can observe how the market develops, see if the Yankees soften their stance, or if another contender unexpectedly steps in and reshapes the conversation. In doing so, they keep leverage without committing resources prematurely, which aligns closely with how they have approached recent off-seasons. From Bellinger's side, every passing day carries both opportunity and risk. Waiting could invite a richer offer or a longer-term commitment that better aligns with his career goals, but it also opens the door for teams to pivot elsewhere and close their books. The longer this stretches out, the clearer it becomes which organizations truly view him as a cornerstone and which see him as a luxury. That distinction matters, especially for a player who has experienced both the heights of superstardom and the frustration of being questioned. Meanwhile, the division itself looms large over every angle of this discussion. The American League East does not forgive hesitation easily, and small advantages often snowball over the course of season. One move can force counter-moves, altering how teams allocate innings, manage workloads, and construct lineups for months at a time. Whether Toronto ultimately steps in or stays on the sidelines, the ripple effects of this decision will be felt well beyond one roster, shaping how rivals measure themselves heading into another fiercely contested year. But before we move forward, don't forget to join our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest news about the Los Angeles Dodgers. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the news, so drop a comment below. What was expected to be a routine media availability turned into a moment that may reshape the landscape of Major League Baseball. In a packed press conference that quickly spiraled into speculation, Mookie Betts signaled that his time with the Los Angeles Dodgers is coming to an end. While no formal transaction was announced and no destination was confirmed, the tone, the words chosen, and the visible emotion left little doubt that a separation is imminent. Betts spoke carefully, avoiding definitive statements, but made it clear that a new chapter is approaching. Sources close to the situation suggest that internal conversations between the star outfielder and the organization have intensified in recent weeks, fueled by differing visions about the future. Financial considerations, long-term competitiveness, and personal priorities are all believed to be part of the equation, even if none were explicitly mentioned at the podium. Around the league, executives and rival front offices are already reading between the lines. A player of Betts' caliber rarely becomes even remotely available without triggering a domino effect. His leadership, consistency, and postseason experience make him an immediate fit for any contender willing to make bold moves. The silence from the Dodgers following the press conference has only amplified the uncertainty, leaving fans and analysts to wonder whether this is the prelude to a trade, a contract standoff, or a carefully managed exit strategy. Inside the clubhouse, reactions appear mixed. Teammates publicly express support, while privately acknowledging that the mood has shifted. Betts has long been viewed as a cornerstone, not just a star, and the idea of his departure challenges the perception of stability that has surrounded the franchise. For now, nothing is official. But in modern baseball, announcements like this rarely exist in a vacuum. Whether this becomes one of the most significant moves of the season or a dramatic negotiation tactic, one thing is certain. The possibility of Mookie Betts leaving the Dodgers has moved from unthinkable to very real, and the entire sport is paying attention. That's all for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay up to date with exclusive news about the Los Angeles Dodgers, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We always appreciate your comments and feedback. See you in the next video.